us an overview of the Modest Mussorgsky's piece, Pictures at an Exhibition, and the mood of the piece, please?
Well, this is it's an unusual work. It's become a staple of the orchestral repertoire, especially through the orchestration by Maurice Ravel. The work was originally written for piano solo, actually, but was not published until some years after the composer's death. It was actually published with some alterations. I mean, Mussorgsky, even though he was a respected composer, he kind of passed away in relative obscurity. There were some issues, personal issues there with him, and you know, a lot of these composers in sort of 19th century Russia sort of function. He was a self-taught musician, and then he was sort of considered perhaps not to be as refined a composer in terms of the technicalities of composition. So there was another composer, Rimsky-Korsakov, who assumed that this work would have to undergo some revisions, and so this piano original was sort of known primarily in the beginning years in this particular arrangement. I mean, for the most part, it existed, you know, in its complete with some slight alterations. And this is the version that Maurice Ravel used to orchestrate it, because I think he recognized the value of the work and the importance of the work, aside from the fact that it was an unusual work in terms of its layout. And I'll come back to talk a little bit about the content of the piece, but I think once Ravel orchestrated the work, of course providing the work with multiple colors, it slowly kind of began to be known primarily as an orchestral piece. But then, of course, through the decades, I mean, the original manuscript was found. People realized the extent of some of the alterations, and so now it has also become part of the sort of pianist's repertoire as a solo piano work. And of course, there are other composers who kind of were inspired by this piece and provided their own orchestration. So we actually have now several different orchestrations of this particular work. But the Ravel orchestration, although it's not the first orchestration of the piece, has become perhaps the most popular and most widely performed. It's an interesting piece in that it's, of course, programmatic to the extent that it portrays, and it's inspired by some drawings by an architect and artist, Victor Hartmann. And then I guess Mussorgsky was a friend of Hartmann and had seen some of these drawings, and I guess was inspired to compose these pictures, sort of scenes. And he kind of ingeniously tied them together with these what he calls promenades. So one can perhaps think of the idea of an individual walking through a gallery, and that's how the work begins with this sort of march-like, well, not procession, but sort of a walking pace kind of small piece that then kind of recurs throughout, and it's kind of interspersed throughout the work, and it kind of gives this idea of a person who is walking through a gallery and sees one picture, and then after observing this particular picture, then continues on to the next part of the exhibition. And so there's kind of a uniting thread, among the several different pieces. So in each piece portrays a distinct scene or character. Some of these pictures have survived, but not all of them. So we have today, you get a pretty clear idea of what the composer is trying to represent with each picture, with each drawing. But some of them have not survived, unfortunately. So there are a lot of interesting and very contrasting kinds of scenes. You know, each scene will have a title, so there are 14 in all different kinds of scene, including these promenades. So you'll have, for example, some drawings portraying some mythical kind of Russian folklore figures. You'll have a drawing representing two Jewish characters, one rich and one poor. You'll have some parks, some open markets. And so the movements are all very brief, and they're just kind of all united through these, or tied in with these sort of interspersed promenades. And then it concludes with what Mussorgsky calls the Great Gate of Kiev. And it's sort of based on a design that Hartmann had done on the city of Kiev. So this is very noble and very kind of majestic ending to the whole piece. There's no real thematic material that links the movements. It's just sort of one picture after the next. But it's a very exciting piece in this particular orchestration. It's a very exciting piece for the orchestra because it features a lot of single instruments. So you'll hear a lot of solo playing throughout. There's tuba solo, there's a saxophone solo, there's many multiple wind solo, horn solo, trumpet solo, of course. Trumpet solo starts the piece with this very famous tune, which is the tune of the first promenade. And then of course it's a kind of tour de force for the orchestra because it becomes very exciting towards the end. It's a very brilliant piece to play.